Welcome to the 6th episode of our Let's Talk About podcast series, the LuxCMA audio channel for high-level insights and updates. My name is Beata Wlodarczak-Mantione and I will be your host for today's podcast, in which we will be exploring the topic of carbon credits as well as carbon credits trading and securitization. I'm here with Miao Li, Head of Debt Capital Markets at BIL, Ruslana Hrischeva, Partner Capital Markets and Debt Finance at White & Case, and Danis Arvanitidis, Banking and Finance Associate at AKD. For those who aren't familiar with this concept, carbon credits seem to be more complex and more technical in nature than other sustainability-linked topics, and not everyone understands what they really are, how they are used, and what role they can play in enhancing sustainability objectives. We would like, therefore, to take a closer look at these concepts and see what they really mean. Miao, starting from you, could you possibly explain to our audience what are carbon credits?
My pleasure, Beata. Essentially, carbon credits are permits that allow companies to emit 1 metric ton of CO2 or its equivalent in other greenhouse gases. Some people consider them as a currency in the environmental marketplace. There are 2 prime types of carbon markets that we need to know about, one regulatory and one voluntary. In the regulatory or compliance space, government policies are the driving force. Take the European emission trading system, the EU ETS, as a prime example. This system operates on a cap-and-trade model. In a simple term, there's a cap on overall emission from selected sectors, like power generation, heavy industry, aviation, and lately expanding to shipping industry. Companies either receive or must purchase emission allowance, and if they don't comply, there will be penalties. By 2023, the EU ETS has played a major role in cutting emissions from European power and industry plants by roughly 47% compared to 2005 levels. Then, there's the voluntary carbon market, which is separate from the regulatory market. Here, business and individuals are stepping up not because of government mandates, but out of their commitment to sustainability. Companies can generate carbon credits from projects that actively reduce emissions, like renewable energy installations, reforestation efforts, and energy efficiency improvements. On the other side of the marketplace, companies can purchase carbon credits to offset their emission voluntarily to align their corporate social responsibility goals. While this market isn't regulated by governments, its credibility is largely maintained by independent verification standards, such as the Verified Carbon Standard and the Gold Standard. As you can see, this creates a tradable asset out of the environmental action, and that is driven by corporate social responsibility initiatives, by consumer demand for sustainable practice, and by investor interest in low-carbon technologies.
Thank you, Miao, for explaining the concept. Could you please now let us know how do actually carbon credits help advance sustainability objectives?
I think we can break down the role of carbon credits from 2 perspectives. From the public perspective, governments set a regional emission cap for a certain period of time, and carbon emissions is then quantified, monitored, and reported, making it possible for countries to track progress towards their climate targets. In addition, take the EU ETS as an example again. The revenue generated from carbon credits flow directly into the national budget of member states, and they're used to finance investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency upgrades, and clean technologies. You see, this creates a positive feedback loop, helping to offset carbon and achieve more ambitious net emission reduction goals. From the private perspective, it quantifies the trajectory of sustainable development efforts and prices in externality. A declining emission gap informs a long-term rising carbon price. This incentive encourages business to trim their emissions in a cost-efficient manner. Moreover, the voluntary carbon market facilitates and promotes the private sector to participating in carbon offsetting activities. This proactive approach not only helps business to meet their social responsibility goals, but also sparks market-driven investment, and innovation in clean technologies. In summary, carbon credits are not just financial instruments. They drive corporate innovation by embedding the cost of carbon emission into business models. They enable individual participation in reducing carbon emissions, and at the same time, they empower the public sector to finance transformative investments. This makes carbon credit a powerful tool to align economic incentive at all levels with our overarching sustainability objectives.
Diving deeper in the topic, Ruslana, could you please clarify what type of carbon credit capital markets transactions do we see in Luxembourg? And what are the distinctive advantages of Luxembourg as a jurisdiction for carbon credit transactions?
Luxembourg has emerged as a key financial center for voluntary carbon credit capital markets transactions. Its strong regulatory framework, leadership in sustainable finance, and its innovation in financial structuring make it an ideal jurisdiction for this type of deals. We are seeing several types of carbon credit transactions in Luxembourg. Notably, one of them is through the securitization of forward flows of voluntary carbon credits. So buying directly a carbon credit from the project developer might be complicated. So these structures allow investors to provide upfront financing to carbon credit producers. So typically this would be project developers generating carbon credits or companies engaging in decarbonization efforts. And in exchange, they will get an exposure to future cash flows from the sale of the carbon credits. So the investor gains exposure to the voluntary carbon credits without having to go through any burdensome formalities related to buying them directly. And we see that the Luxembourg securitization vehicle is a very popular structure for these type of repacks. So the vehicle will raise capital by issuing notes to investors, and then it will lend that capital to the producer or project developer of carbon credits. The producer often commits to deliver a certain volume of credits to a buyer in the future. And what the Luxembourg securitization vehicle does is bridging the financing gap. It provides funds in advance, allowing the project generating the carbon credits to proceed. And once the carbon credits have been produced and sold, it will get repaid. So the investor base for this type of products, as mentioned by Miao, is particularly diversified with an appetite for the voluntary carbon credit exposures generally, whether it is to meet sustainability targets, to hedge future compliance costs, or simply to invest in the low carbon transition. The securitization vehicle is a prime choice for this type of transactions because of its overall operational flexibility and cost efficiency. So this includes a broad range of corporate forms available, tax opaque or tax transparent, that can truly be tailored to the needs of each client. This also includes the possibility to carry out several carbon credit repack transactions out of the same vehicle by creating compartments. So compartments are easy to create and liquidate. They simply require a board resolution for that, which presents an overall cost efficiency. The structure also offers legal certainty and robustness through the recognition of asset segregation between compartments by law, as well as the enforceability of limited recourse and non-petition provisions. There is overall flexibility in the definition of the repayment mechanics and collateral structuring in general, which can be freely determined and tailored to the needs of the clients. So these flexible structuring options are one of Luxembourg's key advantages for this type of deals. This is in addition to the Luxembourg tax framework, which allows properly structured SV to achieve tax neutrality and no withholding tax on payments to investors, which ensures a maximum efficiency for cross-border transactions. So more broadly, Luxembourg is really the place to do this type of deals. It offers a comprehensive sustainable finance ecosystem. It is home to the Luxembourg Green Exchange, which is the world's first and only platform fully dedicated to sustainable securities and hosts over 1 trillion in listed sustainable instruments. It is also the leading European jurisdiction in ESG and impact funds. Finally, Luxembourg's regulatory infrastructure and proactive innovation track record underscore the country's deep-rooted commitment to channeling capital to impactful projects. So in short, Luxembourg is a very popular jurisdiction for capital market transactions involving repacks of voluntary carbon credits. And this is because a combination of legal, financial, regulatory and tax advantages, which help support the full life cycle of the transaction from structuring and issuance to execution and long-term impact.
Thank you very much, Ruslana. Danis, turning to you, Given the dynamic evolution of the policy objectives in the area, could you let us know what, from your perspective, is the future of carbon credits?
Thank you. Let's start globally. The international carbon credit landscape has been anything but static. We've seen the United States, once a key player in international climate leadership, take a step back, and with the Trump administration returning, the US has not only pulled away from the Paris Agreement, but has also rolled back over 100 environmental regulations, gutted advisory panels, and slashed funding for climate science. The message for certain parts of the US corporate world has been clear: cut sustainability efforts, focus on short-term shareholder value. And despite this pullback, the global carbon credit market is still growing, and fast. The regulated market, worth just over $110 billion, is expected to quadruple in the next decade. Meanwhile, the voluntary market, valued at under $2 billion, is also set to grow rapidly, possibly doubling every few years. So what's driving this growth? First, I would say rising corporate commitments to net zero targets, particularly across Europe and Asia. Secondly, the global spread of carbon pricing initiatives, from emissions trading systems to carbon taxes and adjustment mechanisms. And it's also worth mentioning that the 29th Annual United Nations Climate Change Conference gave this market a further boost by advancing Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, setting the stage for more structured international carbon trading. And on top of that, India and Vietnam are preparing to launch their own carbon markets, and jurisdictions like the UK, Australia, Chile, and Taiwan are setting up carbon border rules, similar to what the EU is doing, to make sure international trade supports their climate goals. So the question is, where does Luxembourg fit into this changing landscape? Luxembourg is ideally placed to play a leading role. With our deep expertise in fund structuring, securitization, and cross-border finance, we are perfectly placed to support the next evolution of the carbon market, one that is transparent, compliant, and investor-ready. From the Luxembourg Green Exchange to securitization platforms and tokenized carbon assets, we have the infrastructure to support both regulatory and voluntary markets, and the credibility, of course, to attract institutional capital. Think securitized carbon credit streams, institutional-grade funds, or blockchain-based registries for enhanced traceability, all of which can be domiciled, structured, and supervised right here. So while global climate policy may seem uneven at times, the future of carbon credits remains promising, and Luxembourg has the tools, talents, and trust to help shape that future.
We have come to the end of this episode. Thank you, Miao, Ruslana, and Danis, for sharing your valuable insights on the carbon credit topic. As we have heard, carbon credits trading can significantly help enhance sustainability objectives. They encourage emissions reduction, promote corporate accountability, and help fund sustainable projects. And Luxembourg is perfectly placed to take a leading role in this market segment. Dear audience, we hope you enjoyed the discussion and took away some valuable insights. If you did, don't forget to leave us a review and share your thoughts on our Lux CMA LinkedIn page. We'd love to hear your take. Make sure you subscribe to the Lux CMA Let's Talk About podcast on Spotify for fresh expert insights and upcoming episodes, as we continue to bring you the latest insights and updates from the world of sustainable finance. You can also catch this episode and all previous ones on the Lux CMA YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode. Until then, keep thinking green.